Thank you so much. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Atul Kumar, and currently I'm doing my MBA from IIT Roorkee. And at MRC, as an intern, my topic for research was sediment management for the Brahmaputra River. Can you go to the next slide? Divya, next slide. Yeah. So these are the contents of my presentation. Next slide. Brahmaputra River, as we know, originates from the Yangtze Glacier in Tibetan Himalayas, and it traverses almost 2,900 kilometers to reach the sea, out of which 1,600 kilometers is traveled in China, followed by 900 kilometers in India, and then 400 kilometers in Bangladesh. It is one of the largest river for our country, and also has an average depth of 125 feet and has an average width of 9.5 kilometers. This large river system supports a life of around 190 million people across the three countries that it flows from. The rivers enter in India from Arunachal Pradesh and finally drains into the Bay of Bengal. The Tibetan plateau, from where the river originates, is actually 4 to 5 kilometers above the sea level. And when a river flows from such a great height, it gathers a lot of pace. As a result, it erodes a lot of loose soils and rocks that comes along its way, which eventually results into sedimentation. The fact that the Brahmaputra River accounts for 30% of the total water resources on national level and 40% of the total hydropower potential means that it is a very important river system for our country, and any problem related to it is a cause of national concern. So it becomes imperative that we have a very good understanding of underwater domain awareness regarding the river so that we can take right measures to treat the river and get the best out of it. Next slide. So the objective of the project was to understand the current policies that are there in place for the river, and also what more can be done in this regard to increase the effectiveness of the policy framework along with the enhanced underwater domain awareness for the Brahmaputra River. Next slide. The methodology thus adopted for this project was first to understand the existing sedimentation issues in the river, and then to review the current policy frameworks and the gaps that are there in it. Also, to establish a global to Indian perspective, overview of policy framework that is there in place for Yellow River was done before discussing the policy changes or the scope for policy interventions in Brahmaputra River. These were majorly done with the review of comprehensive papers and literature available related to the topic. Next slide. Yeah. So the literature review for the sedimentation issues was done in three major parts. The first was for the sedimentation issues. Here, various papers from different authors and publication helped me understand that the existing sedimentation issues, like the change in morphology of the Brahmaputra River, the braided channels of the river, as well as how all these are related to the sedimentation problem, and also how the factors like soil erosion and floods are actually interlinked with the sedimentation issues. Next slide. The second part of the literature review was concerning the current policy framework that is there in place for the Brahmaputra River and is responsible to take care of the river. Papers from Anthem Press and Observer Research Foundation helped me understand what is the role that government and the institutions plays in the whole scheme of things, and what are the challenges that they face on regular basis. Also, it helped me understand the role of institutions like Brahmaputra Board that plays in the betterment of the river. Next slide, Divya.
Atul, we lost your voice. Are you there?
Divya, next slide. Yeah, thank you. The next review was related to the policies in place for the Yellow River. The reason why Yellow River was taken into consideration because it is important to understand the whole geographic and the dynamics of the Yellow River, as it also faced the same issue as the sedimentation, and China was successful in mitigating the issues that was caused by sedimentation. So this helped me understand in understanding how effective the soil and water conservation policy was in terms of mitigating the issues caused by sedimentation in China. And it also helped me establish a global to Indian perspective in the whole scheme of things. Next slide, Divya. Yeah. So this is the mind map which I have put together after doing all the research work. done here. So at the center, we have the sediment management for the Brahmaputra River, and the various branches. Yes, the various branches suggest the various factors related to the topic. The first is obviously the causes that eventually leads to the whole sedimentation problem. These causes comprises of anthropogenic activities, soil erosions, movement of the glaciers, as well as various climatic changes in terms of heavy rainfall that occurs. The issues that are caused because of these causes are segregated in two parts. The first issue is concerning the dam and the reservoirs. The second is regarding the riparian ecosystem issues. In dams and reservoirs, the issues that occurs are like the water holding capacity of the reservoirs and dams are reduced because of sedimentation. Also, it hampers the productivity of the dams and reservoirs. And in terms of the riparian ecosystem, the issues that generally originates because of sedimentation are that it causes the change in the course of the river, and it also in some way or the other contributes to the floods that happen on a regular basis. It also had adverse effect on the aquatic life of the river. Then the stakeholders who are related to the sedimentation for the Brahmaputra River is the Inland Waterways Authority of India. The Brahmaputra Board is there, along with the Assam and Arunachal Pradesh government, and the Central Water Commission, along with the local people who are dependent directly on the river. The sediment strategies which are there in place are segregated in three fronts. Here, the first is the yield reduction, which actually talks about mitigating or limiting the sediment origin from the origin itself. And this is done with the help of embankments as well as afforestation and adopting various vegetation practices, which ensures that least amount of soil erosion happen, which will eventually lead to sedimentation. The second is sediment trap, which actually talks about digging traps in the riverbeds, which helps in catching the sediments in a much smaller area rather than it being circulated to a much larger area. The third is sediment removal, which is a very sought after techniques or method used to solve the sedimentation problem. And it comprises of dry excavation as well as dredging and sediment redistribution along with sediment siphoning. The policy gaps that are there in place is the overemphasis is at times given to one issue, which leads to the negligence of various other issues or aspects of the river. Then also the absence of integrated or holistic river-based management system, which actually leads to a lot of gap and time taken in resolving any issue that arises in terms of sedimentation for the river. The capacity or the capability building that the scope is there for the Brahmaputra river is that we can have a much more better and we can do the strengthening of the institution so that it becomes much more capable and potent enough to take decisions to mitigate the issues that happen because of sedimentation. Then we can also have better hiring processes so that we have a very well skilled workforce available at our disposal to take care of the river, along with promotion of other water resource building, and also better infrastructure and system to handle the flood related issues in terms of forecasting as well as avoiding or mitigating the disaster that happens due to the floods. Next slide, Divya. The policy approach framework which I developed here was highlighted in this slide, and it is in two fronts. Like the first policy intervention can be done in domestic side, and then the second can be done in the international side. The domestic side actually interventions like we can have is the regular survey of the Brahmaputra river, which will help us in understanding what is the sediment type that is there in the river, and also forming of a dedicated body which can take care of the river in order to restrict or mitigate the sedimentation issues. And the hurdles I've also discussed, like in implementing the intervention for the domestic aspects, there are hurdles that can be there, like there could be a lack of skilled workforce which will be conducting the surveys. Also, having a foolproof method to conduct the survey is one of the challenges here. Then taking approvals from various stakeholders involved in the river can become a cumbersome task because it can be a time-taking process in order to implement any of the suggestions or measures taken to manage the river. Then in terms of international side, the intervention that is proposed here from my end is we can have a mutually agreed memorandum of understanding as well as agreement to share the benefits between the countries who are directly involved with Brahmaputra rivers, mainly China, India, and Bangladesh. And also, we can have a look at the UN's non-navigation law, which actually talks about sharing the benefits of a transboundary river, which between the nations that are concerned with it directly. The hurdles that we can face in implementing the interventions in international front is that there that the lack of an international regulatory body which will take care for the implementation of these interventions is one problem or one hurdle that we can face here. Then also reaching a mutual ground to discuss all or any of the policy changes proposed can become a hurdle in implementing these policy interventions on international level. Next slide. The domestic framework is something which might look like this in this slide. The topmost level is a dedicated body which takes care of the Brahmaputra river, and this body will be aptly and very much supported by international bodies as well as domestic body. The international support can come in the shape and form of World Bank's fund initiative that has happened in past, whereas the domestic support can be gained from various bodies like Inland Waterways Authority of India, Central Waterways Commission, and Assam as well as Arunachal Pradesh government. The dedicated body for the Brahmaputra river will be getting inputs from two fronts, and the first is the basin representative and second is the sub-basin representative. The representatives of the basin as well as sub-representative will be getting inputs from the departments like HR department, survey department, forecasting department, and the local authority. So this is how the workflow of the domestic framework will look like, where the inputs will be given from from department which works on ground level, and then it will be forwarded upwards towards the dedicated body which is there in place for Brahmaputra river. Next slide. For the international framework, the exact framework looks like this, where the topmost level comprises of Council of Ministers, which will be supported by the Technical Advisory Committee. The Technical Advisory Committee here will be responsible to provide inputs to the Secretariat as well. Secretariat here will be taking the inputs from the country officers and then will forward it to the Council of Ministers. The inputs that the Secretariat will gain is from the country officers, and the country officers will obviously be from the four countries that is directly or indirectly involved with the Brahmaputra river. Like the three of the countries here, China, India, and Bangladesh, are directly related to Brahmaputra river, whereas Bhutan also becomes a major player here because the sub-basin of Brahmaputra river is concerning the Bhutan as well. So all the country officers from their respective countries can give inputs from the input that they receive from the working groups, and the working groups can be in terms of hydromorphology, floods and climate change, as well as biodiversity, then economics and the governance working groups. So in this way, the whole system of international framework will look like, and it is supposed to work. Next slide. Then finally, the whole idea of sediment management in the Brahmaputra river is actually very much important and is very much in line with the revival of waterways transportation. As we know that waterways is an area or a segment which has been neglected field for a very long period of time, and the major stakeholders involved are the Inland Waterways Authorities of India as well as Central Water Commission, the World Bank, and the local riparian population. India is blessed with navigable waterways of 14,500 kilometers, including river canals and backwater creeks. However, the 55 million tons of cargoes which are transported every year, out of which only 3 to 4% is done with the help or done via the waterways transportation, which is a very less number, and there is a certain and obvious scope of improvement in this regard. And the sediment management, if done properly, will surely act as a catalyst in the much awaited development in this segment. So it is also very much supported and has got a major boost from the recent budget that was proposed by our finance minister, where it is explicitly mentioned that in the coming 3 years, there is a plan to develop 100 cargo terminals under the PM Gati Shakti master plan. So all these things will eventually leads to a same direction of the development of the waterways transportation. So that was it from my side, and I will invite the next intern to present. Thank you.